Hi, I'm Shelby Manis, and this is the No Shame Podcast. Today I'm hosting for John Grooters, but will also be interviewing him. Join John on location in Bucharest, Romania, as he gives us some behind-the-scenes details on his new movie, Sabina, a look into the lives of Richard and Sabina Wurmbrand during the time of the Nazis. Today on No Shame.
Have no shame, no, we are not afraid, no shame. On the gospel of his name, it's the power of God, by which we all are saved. We need not be afraid, no shame.
Hello everyone and welcome to the No Shame Podcast. My guest today is John Grooters. Wait, don't you usually host this thing? Where are you at, John?
You know, it's time for a new generation to host the No Shame Podcast with John Grooters, and I nominate Shelby Manis to be the new host of the John Grooters Podcast. You'd be great at it.
How about that? Well, we had to do a little bit of figuring out what we were going to do today because John is currently not here. He is the award-making filmmaker today. His role as a writer and director in Romania. So, John, tell us, what time is it there right now?
Well, I'm 7 hours ahead of you. You're in Eastern time, so it's probably 11:15 as you call me back at home, right? So 6:15 here. And I am in Bucharest, the capital of Romania. We're back in the main city. We've been running around the countryside scouting for the last couple of days. But we're back in the production offices here, and I kind of came up to the rooftop patio for a little privacy for our conversation. And it was a beautiful rainy day today in Bucharest, so I just report the temperatures have cooled down from oppressive heat and humidity, and I love it today.
That's beautiful. What's that behind you?
The skyline of Bucharest. You see one of the beautiful Orthodox churches kind of to the left of your screen. And, what a city this is. Bucharest was known back in the early part of the 20th century as Little Paris. So there are parts of the old town which are stunningly beautiful. You really would sort of recognize yourself in Paris or somewhere along the Champs-Élysées. But then when communism came through this country, they destroyed a lot of the beauty. And, communism was sort of famous for just building repetitive, functional, architecturally ugly buildings. And so you can sort of see over my right shoulder a little bit of the communist era stuff, which are just usually 10-story apartment buildings with stairways, and every apartment the exact same size. Nikita Khrushchev dictated that every apartment for every human being should be identical so that nobody had more or less than anyone else. So every Soviet communist apartment built for the regular person is pretty much a very small, very Spartan place. So there's elements of that here in Bucharest. And then, of course, since 1989, the overthrow of Ceausescu and communism, the city has been trying to sort of emerge from that. And so there are signs of new construction and new life as an Eastern European city is sort of struggling in some ways to move into, like a mainstream European city. So you get all three of those elements in Bucharest. And this is the 10th time we've now been here over the last 3.5 years. We've done 2 feature films here and a curriculum series. And in that time, we've made really great friends. And so the partners that we work with here are people now we look forward to seeing, hardworking, very good-hearted people. So I have nothing but favorable impressions of Romania right now as a country and our experiences here.
Wow, that's incredible. So communism, you started to talk about that a little bit. You've been doing a lot of research on communism for this film, for the last film that you did, Tortured for Christ, and this film that you're doing now, Sabina. Can you tell us a little bit about Sabina? This is your second time there, correct?
Yeah, second feature experience here, and thanks to the Voice of the Martyrs, which is the organization founded by Richard Wurmbrand, and still Voice of the Martyrs today has become a real friend and partner in ministry for us, because what Richard Wurmbrand, who we're telling the story about, Richard and Sabina Wurmbrand, who are from here, we're here because this is Richard and Sabina's hometown. So we're back in Romania to tell their story as accurately as possible. That's why we're here. Mm-hmm. What Richard and Sabina did in their lifetimes for the kingdom of God, it was amazing because they were put into such an incredibly difficult period in history and specifically difficult place in the midst of that period. And I can't hardly imagine, I mean, how the suffering of the 20th century was for so many people under the authoritarian oligarchs of both communism and Nazism. So many tens of millions of people were brutally murdered and suffered. And so Richard and Sabina, in some ways, are just metaphors for what the whole problem was under these leaders. But what beautiful people they were. They were married in 1937 or 36. I can't remember right now. But they meet each other. They fall in love. They get married. They're beautiful, successful, intelligent young people. I mean, Sabina in the 30s was a college student at Sorbonne, the very same college that Marie Curie went to. So she was quite an exceptional woman for her day, even as a college student. And Richard, as a young man, was already off on a very successful career working for an investment firm, and he was extremely bright and talented. So in any culture, these two were going to be, yuppies. and that's what they were. They both came from Jewish families, but they weren't believers. They weren't adherents. And so they meet, and they're just interested in success, and they're very much living a worldly, successful lifestyle. And what happens is Richard comes down with tuberculosis, and in a year-long period total rest, he has a lot of time to reflect on his life. And he doesn't like what he sees. He doesn't like what his motivations are. He has no basis for his morals. And he starts to bring this up with his young wife. She wants nothing to do with these thoughts that Richard's having about how he wants to live his life. And he says, if we ever had children, how would we raise them? What morals would we have? But she wants nothing to do with that. She had been told that Jesus was the enemy of her people, or she was really off-put by the whole potential of the Bible or of Jesus. So we're getting to meet these people, and we're seeing how those two become, I think, these titans, in my opinion, of the Christian faith. People who set the bar high for all of the rest of us who claim to follow Jesus, who want to be disciples of Jesus. When Jesus says, if they hated me, they will hate you also. Well, in America, we kind of maybe take that with a grain of salt, but the life that Richard and Sabina lived, they felt the wounds of that. And what happened is that the German people and the Nazis were the first to come into Romania. And so early in World War II, Romania was overrun by German Nazis. And the Holocaust came here. And the Holocaust in Romania was second only to Germany into how many casualties, how many people were killed, how many neighborhoods were cleansed. And Sabina paid a terrible price in that war, losing her beloved sisters and her beloved brother and her parents. And so we in this movie, we get to sense what a little bit of it was like under the Nazis. But interestingly enough, this country halfway through the war switched sides. It's very unusual. And they said, no more with this Hitler. He's nuts. So we want to move over to the Allies. But the Allies by that time were not only America and Britain in that group, but also it was Stalin and the Russians, because Stalin and the Russians were fighting the Nazis on their Eastern Front. So when the Nazis were defeated, what happened was this country was overrun instantly, almost, by communists and communism. And that was what the previous film we already filmed and put out 2 years ago called Tortured for Christ dealt with, where communism is an atheistic system, and you will be re-educated if you don't buy into that atheism. And so pastors and Christians and free thinkers are routinely executed and put into re-education camps. And re-education under communism isn't about book learning, it's about torturing you into agreeing with what they have to say. So that was Torture for Christ. And what Richard and Sabina showed us is that they can be lovers of Christ and tender-hearted people who forgive their enemies, and pray for them who persecute you. They modeled that. They did it. And you can probably hear the siren running below me in the streets. We're outside on the streets of Bucharest, and I think it's a small issue. So Richard and Sabina Wurmbrand blew my mind with the way that they were able to return love in the face of hatred, return kindness in the face of evil, to not return evil for evil, as the New Testament says. So we made Torture for Christ. It's been a wonderful film. It's changed many people's hearts, including mine. But thankfully, we were able to say, how did they become those people? And our new movie, Sabina, which is subtitled Tortured for Christ, the Nazi Years, is about their backstory. It's a prequel, you might say, and it's about how they became the people that we will meet in Tortured for Christ, and we're here to finish filming that movie now.
So you previously have filmed quite a bit of it, right? This is just the tail end. So you were here in what, February? Yep.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So we were here scouting almost a year ago, last year, October of 2019. We scouted in October, and then again in December. We were here for 2 weeks in those 2 months. And then we came out all January and February to do pre-production and then principal, because this Sabina film takes place over the course of a number of years, so we needed winter scenes. We planned then at the end of February to take a temporary reprieve, hold on to our production offices, kind of just leave everything, wait for the seasons to change, and then come back in May when we would shoot the summertime and the springtime and all the scenes that we needed for that.
But that didn't happen.
Well, the whole world, the coronavirus 19 shut down everything on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
It's really amazing. No matter where you go, it's people wearing masks, and it's businesses that have been shut down, and it's this virus that's. So of course our trip was canceled along with everybody's.
Yep.
And in fact, even the project was a little bit in jeopardy. You just never know what's going to happen when you have a delay like that. Are the actors still going to be acting? Are they still going to be living in Romania? Can you get your crew together? Will you ever be able to get back in the country? Will people get sick with the COVID-19? There's just so much uncertainty. So I'm thrilled to be back. We were just postponed from May, and it's still dicey. I mean, travel is still, there's regulations, and we have to be granted some exemptions because of the work that we're doing, and we're being careful with our procedures. But if we can make it through the next 2 weeks and we're protected by God and his angels, and we can get through this shoot, then we'll have everything in the can we need. We have 5 or 6 days of principal photography left to shoot.
Okay. Yeah, crazy. And so you'll be filming the May scenes. So what were those scenes? You had some wedding scenes in there?
Well, yeah, we have a lot of fun stuff. We have the early romance of these young Richard and Sabina. We have the first time they meet. We've got some beautiful scenes of the lovely young, her name at the time was Sabina Oster, and she's driving through the countryside in this fancy convertible with her uncle. And there's an aura of wealth and success with the young lives. And the first time they meet is quite an interesting. He's expecting to meet a fiancée that has been actually set up by his mother, and the fiancée was very wealthy. And Richard was fine with the wealth part of it, not so excited about the girl. And right while he's waiting for that girl, his uncle brings in Sabina for a visit, and it's kind of love at first sight between these two. And so we meet them as they fall in love together. And then we've got a beautiful a wedding scene, and then in the wedding scene we meet her family and we hear about their character a little bit. So that'll be very nice. We have some scenes to shoot when he is sick, recovering in a because what they would do if you had TB, basically the cure was go in the fresh air and get a lot of sunshine. So he was sent to a sanatorium in the mountains to just lay in the sun for a year and not even move, really, lay totally still. So anyway, we've got some of those scenes to shoot. We have some night scene checkpoints to shoot. I don't know, various things over the 6 days.
So you're saying Richard had TB before and after? Because at the end of Tortured for Christ, he has TB again.
Yeah.
Was this? Yeah. It was his second time?
Yeah, I don't think I realized that when we were doing Tortured. He didn't catch it for the first time in the prisons. He was susceptible already because he had a very serious bout. And in fact, in the story, you have a 50% survival chance of TB. It was a serious illness. So yeah, he spends about a year in this sanatorium. And for a guy who was running 100 miles an hour, for him to pretty much be stopped in his tracks, it's sort of like everybody all of a sudden being quarantined. He was quarantined for a year, more or less. So that's a big deal. And it was the seeds. I don't know. This is my interpretation, but looking back on it, in retrospect, you see God had to get his attention. And I think had Richard not gotten sick, it might have never happened, or it certainly would have taken a long time. But God just stopped this guy And really, through the love of some people and through him getting a hold of a Bible and a Christian book called the Brothers Ratisbon, his thinking changed and his self-evaluation changed. And he decided, or made at least the seeds of the decision, to question the way he was living his life at that time.
Wow. Isn't it crazy how God just takes hold of us and just brings circumstances into our lives that we would have never imagined, and we probably wouldn't think that are a good thing, but he uses them for his good. And that's just amazing to me, to get our attention, to bring us back to him.
You know, bad things happen to good people, right? We all know that it's not that life does not going to deal us wounds. Painful, deep, mortal wounds. And it is silly for people of faith to dismiss that or to have this attitude that, no, everything's always... The Bible has the book of Lamentations. You know, if you read the Psalms, half of the Psalms of David are Psalms of lament.
Absolutely.
One of the misreads of Christianity is that we're just slap happy people who believe nothing bad's ever going to happen. Believe me, that the real followers of Jesus know it's just the opposite, that Jesus himself was hated, was spit on, was persecuted, ultimately was tried on charges that were not true, that were trumped up. He was beaten, he was mocked, and he was abandoned by even his 12 best friends at first. They didn't even stick with him. And he was tortured in probably one of the most brutal, cruel methods of human execution that's ever been devised in the face of the earth. The Romans were particularly good at torturing people so as to be a deterrent for any kind of political dissidence. Jesus, of course, suffers all that. But he says at the Passover before he dies, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. I learned something today, Shelby. We're doing a wedding scene. Mm-hmm. And I've seen, enough and done some work in Israel and knew we needed, a chuppah to put over the heads of the wedding, a ketubah to sign the wedding. And I've seen, you've probably seen this, that they always stomp on a glass. You see how they break the glass at the Jewish wedding? So I had that in my script, but to be honest, I had not a clue why they did that. Do you know why they do that?
I don't. I've not heard.
So just today, a good brother that we met at a church here, Judy and I have been going to a church on Sundays. We met a brother named Ephraim, who's from Israel. He came today as a consultant for our Jewish wedding because I just don't want to make egregious errors. You know, if you make an error in a movie, then anybody who knows a little bit about whatever you made an error of dismisses your whole movie.
Exactly.
I'm a sports guy, or I'm a guitar. If there's guitar playing in a movie and I'm like, that's baloney, it's upside down. I mean, I forget the whole. So what if I showed this movie to, either Messianic Jews or Jews, and I had the wedding completely wrong. So anyway, thank God that Ephraim was here today. And I asked him, why do they smash the glass? So he taught me that the wedding, and by the way, Shelby here was only recently married herself. It's been less than a month, right, since your wedding?
Just over a month.
Just about a month.
Yep.
Judy and I were at her wedding, and I loved it. I loved being at your wedding. I just loved the way you celebrated and made your commitments before God, and you're in a small group of people. It was obviously Plan B. The wedding wasn't as big, but you guys are American Protestant 21st century Christians, and there's a way a wedding goes. You do your vows, you have your bridesmaids. I naturally assumed, a lot of that stuff. None of that was the same. So the wedding will open with Richard having the cup of wine in his hand, and he says to you something like, in this cup, I make my covenant with you. And he gives her the glass, and she drinks it. And then he drinks it, and he finishes it. And then he takes that cup, the cup of the covenant, right? That's how they seal a covenant, by both drinking in it. It's like there's not poison in it because I'm drinking it, you're drinking it. We trust each other. Yeah. And then he puts the wine glass on the ground and he smashes the cup. That means nobody can undo the covenant that was just made in that cup.
Wow.
Now, isn't that cool? I did not know that until about 3 hours ago, even though I had the smashing of the wine glass. The smashing of the wine glass cements the covenant between them. Now think about Jesus in the Passover. This cup is the new covenant in my blood. That's always kind of a little bit gone over my head, even through the studies we've had. But in Jesus' covenant, he's not making us drink it, the cup of wrath, the Elijah cup. He's drinking all of it. He's doing both sides of the agreement. He's paying the atonement for our sins. And when you think of Jesus in the garden saying, Lord, if there's any way that this cup might not, I don't have to drink of this, but not my will, but yours. If this covenant could be arranged any other way, doesn't that just enhance your understanding of the New Testament, of the Passover supper, of Jesus in the garden? So I'm very thankful that the wedding now will be sealed with the cup of the covenant, and I hope some people get the meaning from that.
That is amazing. I love that. I hope everyone hears this podcast, and I wish I had that for my wedding to be able to go back and do it. But gosh, that's so beautiful. It's crazy how scripture just comes to life when you figure out the symbolism. There's so much symbolism throughout all of scripture, and that we don't understand as Americans, as Western thinkers, we just don't understand a lot of the cultural aspects, because in some ways it's written for everyone, but in a lot of ways it was written at a specific date and time, and we have to have the context to fully understand everything. Yeah. Wow. So amazing.
You know, we've had the great privilege over the past 15 years to do the That the World May Know series with Ray Vander Laan. It's distributed by Focus on the Family, and you can see any of these at thattheworldmayknow.com. We've done now 80 episodes with Ray, as he is the best teacher I've come across to address this very thing, Shelby. And Ray teaches us in the land of Israel or Egypt or Greece or Turkey or wherever we happen to be on these adventures, by walking us through the land and getting us a sense of cultural context. And Ray's teaching helps bring the scriptures to life in certain new ways. They're just more fun. They're just more interesting when you have a teacher like that. I'll just give a little previs now. We're just signing a deal to film Ray's entire 50-lesson discipleship senior class. Ray could teach at any university in the world or any seminary in the world, but he chooses to work with high school students. It's his passion. He'd rather meet kids when they're that age. And his discipleship class for seniors at Holland Christian High School is usually filled with grown-ups in the back rows, because it's just an incredible class. He's been reluctant his whole career to film the class because he never wanted to interfere with the students' experience. COVID has taught him, I think it might be time. So I'm just giving a little previs that we're gonna film that 50 episode class come God willing, come the spring of 2021. And in addition to That the World May Know, which are fantastic, in context in the land, and I highly recommend anyone go there. I'm looking forward to filming Ray's class, because I'm sure he knows the Cup of the Covenant and 1,000 other things, and it is fun to explore those things.
Absolutely. And if you're just joining us, I am Shelby Manis. I work for John at Grooters Productions, and I'm here with John, and he is on location in Romania, and we're talking about his new film, Sabina, which will be coming out in...
It'll come out in the fall of 2021.
Fall of 2021. So I kind of want to get back. We went on a little bit of a goose chase there, but... I want to get back to that film, and I want you to talk to me about the actors. You've just raved about these actors, all Romanian cast, correct?
Yeah.
Yep, all Romanian cast. So you went and scouted them and filmed in Romania. Tell me about that process. Tell me about the two actors you have playing Richard and Sabina.
Any director is going to, I think, admit that directing is 90% casting. There's so much work that we put into this. There's so many days of prep. But at the end of the day, every location, every scene, every lens choice, every camera choice, every budgetary choice, every dress, makeup, hair, special effect, it's still all in the hands of your actors. And, I've seen, and you've seen movies that technically were phenomenal, but if you didn't believe the characters, you're not interested in the film. And conversely, I've seen fairly low budget films that practically did nothing. But if the cast, you can put a camera on the hood of a car, and if the two people in the car's dialogue is interesting, you'll watch it. All that is to say, I have great respect for the actors, and I pray every time we find the right people for the right roles. that's not an easy job. And casting directors and directors and that process, you never know. So if we go back 3.5 years, when I came to Bucharest looking to shoot Tortured for Christ, having been given the privilege to work with that material, which is, this book was an international bestseller. It was the 50-year anniversary of the book. If you've never read it, you have to read it. It's a quick read. But look, the challenge of casting a man to play Richard and a woman to play Sabina was never going to be easy. Because my theory is a good actor can always play a lesser human being. They can play a bad guy, a drunk, and you can always bring yourself down and you can mimic. It's very difficult for any actor, I believe, even the greatest actors of our generation, to somehow convince me that they are Abraham Lincoln, or Madame Marie Curie, or whoever you might want to say, or even Winston Churchill. There's been a few recent movies by about Winston Churchill, and as good as they were, I thought, boy, it's a tall order to ask Gary Oldman to play a man who maybe was one of the greatest men of the 20th century. And I don't think he came close to capturing. I mean, that's just my opinion. He did a great job, but he played him as a drunk, not as a fantastic. So anyway, I'm just saying I think any actor has a challenge to try to convey to the camera more depth, more spark of the holy in this case, if they don't themselves have it. And who has it to the level of the Wurmbrands? Who has been able to suffer, for Christ the way they did? So, excuse me, I said early on, I was working with a different casting agent. Her name was Cinziana on the first movie. And my role was, I'm not going to make a big deal at all about physical attributes. I need to find somebody who can convince me with their words and their expressions that they have this depth and this sense of humor and this patience and all these things that I believe that these people had. And Cinziana, first of all, Bucharest has a tremendous theater community. It's a very, very active city with big theater, little theater, small theater. So there's quite a talented pool of working actors. And after a period of time, we settled on Emil Mondanak to play Richard and Raluca Botez to play Sabina. And I could not have been happier, not only with the acting that they did, but it just turns out, the reason I told you that is that by coincidence, sort of, they are dead ringers. Here comes another siren for the early real people, for Richard and Sabina. And
what do you mean by that? Dead ringers?
They looked like them.
Oh yeah, they look exactly like
same
them.
height, same hair, very similar in physical characteristics. And Raluca looks like the twin sister of Sabina.
Absolutely.
She's the same height, dark hair. So at the end of the movie, we do what a lot of these movies do. We do a few pictures of the real people, and they're like, are those the actors? So I don't know how you want to say. God gave us actors who not only were tremendously talented, no ego type of actors, they're willing to take on the role with earnestness, sincerity, preparation, and they also physically resembled the characters. Now here's the problem. We did Tortured 3 or 4 years ago now, and now we're doing the prequel. So the same actors have to now be 10 years younger. And I think astute, if everyone watches our two movies back to back, they may notice, but through makeup and various things, we're trying to let them be in their late 20s. But it was imperative that we had, I mean, we wouldn't do the movie if I hadn't gotten first the buy-in. That was my first call. Emil and Raluca, are you guys up for another film?
Yeah.
And they both said absolutely, positively, yes. You tell us when and where. I love them both. I respect them both. And I don't know. I mean, I'm blabbering on here, but as a director, I don't always feel this way.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to let this performance from each of them be captured for the next couple of, 10, 15 years. I think people will watch these films. So I'm super proud of the actors, and not just those two, by the way. I mean, there's a lot of other very, very critical roles in both films. And this time, a new casting director, her name's Cassandra, and she knows. I mean, I think we work very hard to find the right cast, and you have the results on screen.
Absolutely. No, the two of them did a phenomenal job in Tortured for Christ in capturing the Wurmbrands, and I have no doubt that they'll capture them in a beautiful way again in this seemingly very different type of a film, but also with the same depth and the same character, and it'll be cool to see, because in Tortured for Christ we see their faith already formed, right? And this movie kind of takes us on a journey of them before they knew Christ and what that process looked like. So it'll be cool to watch them as they portray that transition into those characters.
You know, I'll give you this. Of course, it's sort of like if you go through the movie Titanic, you know the boat's going to sink.
Yes.
So people were going to say, well, why would I go through that movie? I already know the ending. Okay, I'll admit, you know the ending of this movie as it comes to Richard and Sabina. But we've tried to build in the story that you don't know the ending for a lot of the other characters in this movie. And so I don't want you to think, well, this is just a documentary and it's just this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It's not that at all. It's a dramatic story with good story structure and characters that I think are both fascinating, historical, and factual. And you won't know the ending to this movie until the movie ends. You absolutely will not. Of course, you'll know Richard and Sabina's ending, but that's not the whole story. So I really hope that it feels like the kind of movie that you enjoy watching, because you're not sure what's going to happen, and you want to see the story. And then at the same time, you find yourself incredibly encouraged and challenged by the way some Christians have modeled the faith for the rest of us. Yeah. And I hope that rubs off.
Yeah, and we need that right now. I think we have had a lot of leaders that have disappointed us as leaders in this time, and people of the faith need those heroes. They need people like Richard and Sabina Wurmbrand to look up to model after as those role models.
You know, Judy and I are among those people, and we just had a conversation. There's always going to be challenges, right? In a movie this big, there's issues, and sometimes, you know, you have to think of how are we going to respond to this or that challenge, and you know, there's always going to be some opposition at some level, and the way we normally respond to that opposition is, you know, like your first response is, well, that's anyway mine. Maybe not, you're a beautiful person, but there's this, you know, and we sit down just last night and said, all right, let's talk about this. And we said, I wonder how Richard and Sabina would handle this person, you know, or this difficulty. Someone's being demanding, someone's being critical, someone's talking behind your back, and your feelings are hurt. I'm the director. I literally have I can fire anybody on this set right now. Like, that's the power. I'll just fire. How would Richard Wurmbrand handle that? He literally said, I hate communism, but I love the communists. So the very people that were physically torturing this man, he chose to love them in return. In other words, the challenge for Judy and I is no different than the challenge for anyone who walks through this movie. How can we model Christ in the circumstances God has put us? Whatever that is. Richard and Sabina have caused us to think that through from the perspective of how much has Christ forgiven us, and how much then are we to forgive others? It's a very basic tenet of Christianity. It's the basic tenet. And yet somehow we forget it all the time. And somehow we think we're owed this, or we deserve this, or we're right about this, or this is evil, and we can point out, you know what? Didn't save Jesus from the cross, and he says you're going to carry your own cross. So how are we going to handle the adversity is so much more important than whether or not we ever face it.
Absolutely. It's a high bar, but we've been given the tools to give it, and we've been forgiven so much. And we forget that. We forget how fallen we are and what Christ's sacrifice was for us. And it's just so beautiful to be able to capture that on the screen and be able to share it with the world. You often say yourself that capturing things in a movie is a way to bring people to a church that they didn't even know they were walking into, right? And so I think it's a unique calling that you have as a filmmaker to be able to share with people what it looks like to be a follower of Christ.
I think that's right. You know, the plan for this movie, and we'll see, but is to translate it into 100 languages and give it for free to people all over the planet at some point. 100 languages. I couldn't even name 30 languages. So that's at least 70 that I've never even heard of the language, much less I'll never know the television sets or the church rooms or the phones that people might someday find and watch Sabina Tortured for Christ, the Nazi years, in Urdu or in Tajikistan or in Seltal or Tzotzil or Mandarin, you know, or whatever language it comes in. So, you know, I can't really even think about the opportunity that offers. I can only know that we're going to do our best for this movie. We're going to serve, first of all, you know, whatever you do. I don't care if you're a plumber or a teacher or a music instructor or a construction worker or a politician or a filmmaker. You do whatever you do as unto the Lord, as if that's who you're doing it for. So that inspires you to do the best you can. The second thing that inspires me is the trust given to us from our client. I mean, I can't say enough good things about the Voice of the Martyrs and our executive producer, Cole Richards, who has given us the freedom to make this movie without a ton of, or really, you know, any obsessive oversight, and that kind of privilege thrills me and makes me want to give this. You know, they say leave it all on the field. This is a football game where I don't want to be able to take one step when the fourth quarter is over. I want to have given everything I can. But then, I don't know, thirdly is the legacy of Richard and Sabina. This isn't false humility. I am not half the man Richard Wurmbrand was. I mean, this man suffered for Christ, gave his whole life in ministry. So for me to tell his story or Sabina's story, Sabina is just as incredible. She was maybe one of the greatest women in Christianity of the entire 20th century. I don't have enough breadth of intelligence or understanding to be able to say anybody that I think did more, affected more people, told more truth, or was more magnetic than Sabina. So, you know, we recognize this is sort of sacred material. And oddly, had they both lived into their 80s and died in the early 2000s. I never met them, but what the people that know them said, they would never let us make this movie. Sabina would never put her name on a hat and make a movie. Her brand of humility would have had no interest in this. So only after she's dead, when we don't need her permission. At the same time, I want to do this in a way that would honor her permission, tell her story truthfully. And one of the things she would not do would be oversell herself. They were very honest about their failures, very open with their earthiness. They were not these people that walked around as if there was a shiny halo on their head and not on yours. They were people who served Christ by loving the other person, by caring about the other person, by never holding a grudge against the other person. That's what made them great. They would have never pointed the finger at themselves for that. If you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah. What a beautiful reminder. Well, thank you for joining us and being on location in Romania and taking this time. And I think this was something that our audience really would love to hear, and to hear that story of no shame that we get to be a part of telling and are humbled by telling. Just to be able to be a part of that. So thanks, John. I know you're really busy and need to get back to continuing producing this movie.
But I want to give one PS because there's a blessing in this delay that we would have shot in May and now we've been postponed. There's been some expenses, but here's the blessing. Is in addition to filming the rest of Sabina, we're going to shoot one scene from our new film, America Studios film, 9 Days a Soldier. And I just would encourage anybody that might be watching this to look that up. Go to americastudios.com, or even if you're interested, contribute to the Indiegogo page, because we're trying to actually underwrite what we're planning to do. But we're going to shoot one scene from a film that we're dying to make that takes place during the War of 1812 and tells one of the greatest stories in American history. We're flying a wonderful young actor named Caleb Milby all the way from Los Angeles to Bucharest to play in this scene. When we wrap Sabina, we're jumping in the cars and trucks. We're driving 6 hours into the north to a little town called Cebu. and we're going to shoot a scene that looks like it's being shot in upstate New York circa 1814. Upstate New York today has modern cities and all kinds of things in it. So don't tell anybody we're making it look like New York, but our plan is to give a taste of what 9 Days a Soldier as a feature film we pray will be like. And we are hoping and praying that that will come to reality. So being able to shoot a scene, a sizzle reel from that movie, I'm very excited about. We just started casting for that today. And it's a thrill when, as a writer, you for the first time hear actors taking your words and putting it to voice. And it's like, wow, sounds real when they say it. So we started casting for that today in addition to Caleb, and we will be shooting 9 Days a Soldier sizzle. Watch for that on americastudios.com. That'll be something we cut together and put out very, very quickly.
Absolutely. That was americastudios.com, and please contribute to the Indiegogo page. They give a lot of different things for giving. You're really getting something when you're giving, and you're getting a chance to have us make this movie, which we're one thing from the next, right?
Yeah,
blessed
right.
to have some productions on hand right now. So awesome. Thank you so much, John, for this
Shelby.
time. And bless you guys while you are there making this movie and the next.
Great to talk to you. Wish you were here.
Me too.
See you soon.
See ya.
Have no shame, no, we are not afraid. No shame of the gospel of His name. It's the power of God by which we all are saved.
No Shame is a weekly podcast where John Grooters discusses life at the intersection of faith and culture with all kinds of interesting and inspiring guests. Subscribe to the podcast today by going to johngrooters.com, select the podcast tab, and hit subscribe. Don't miss any of these life-giving conversations.